Okay, I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting, work agenda meeting, or administrative meeting, sorry, thank you, of August 20th, 2019 at 7 p.m. For the record, present are Commissioner Vigliotti, Watson, and Staley. Absent is Commissioner Senft, and Commissioner Patuski is also here, and we do not have any alternates. Thank you for filling me in. Okay, so let's get started with the approval of minutes for our meeting of July 16th. Okay, can I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Vigliotti. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. I believe that's unanimous. Okay, there are no zoning referrals, no campsite reviews. So we move on to number 4, which is an 824 review for the sale of 91 Wood Avenue property, which is owned by the town of Stratford. Sandra Zalick is here, and she is an alternate, right?
Yes.
So come, be seated. So now we do have a full group. To all of our commissioners, this is Sandra Zalick, who has been appointed by the town council as an alternate. So welcome aboard.
How do you spell your last name, Sandra?
C-A-L-I-K.
Do you have an email address?
Pardon?
Email address?
Sandra Zalick, I have it.
Okay, hopefully we can get you all the paperwork that was just handed out.
Down at the end.
Oh, good. You get Mr. Senft, since you're actually filling in for Mr. Senft.
The first 2 pages are transmittal pages from the department. It's just for your information on what on the agenda is going to be discussed today. So after the work agenda, the first pages are the bond release pages. I would pull those out because we are not going in that order right now. But after that, pretty much everything is in order. Like you have the meeting minutes, which you just got approved, and that's done. And then the next one, attachment B, as it says, is 91 Wood Avenue 8-24 review. After the minutes, attachment B, memorandum, as it says, that is 91 Wood Avenue, section 8-24 review materials related to 91 Wood Avenue.
Now, is it just the one-page
No,
memorandum?
after
or
that,
it's-
you have all the other pages.
All the other
Until it says attachment C, everything else is attachment B.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, does everybody have where we're at? Yes. Okay. So, yes.
So just to give you an overview of this, it's a town-owned property. It was subject of a foreclosure titled Town of Stratford versus Brad's Geraldine et al. And it resulted in the town vesting in the title in on April 23rd, 2019. So now the town wants the commission's approval to list this property for sale We have been directed to do this by Stratford Redevelopment Authority, and the information that was provided along with this on the following pages shows the affidavit of the appraiser who did the appraisal of this property and who estimated the fair market value to be as $205,000. And after that, everything else that they show is a listing of all properties on that street or nearby which have been sold at similar prices. And it just, shows about the realtor's opinion that this house should be marketed for $229,000. And everything else is just for our evidence that, we're not listing it for too low or too high of a price. So that's it. It's pretty straightforward. It's a residential property.
I'm sorry, you said it's going to be listed at 229,000?
That's what I inferred from this material here. After that sheet, the second sheet that Delibro Realty Group has provided, it says when a site visit was made on 7/17/2019, that's July 17th, only outside access was available, so the suggested marking price is presuming the condition is average. The average market time on an average condition properly priced home as of July 18th, 2019 is 48 days. So in the realtor's opinion, this house should be marketed for $229,000. And once inside access has occurred, a price change will be likely. It's right
Yeah.
before that.
We're looking somewhere in a net of 180.
Sorry?
We're looking somewhere in a net of 180 after expenses?
They said
paid.
its assessed value is 205, and its market value would be 229.
And-
Assessed value is usually 70%
I
of
understand
market
that.
value, yeah.
The question is the total of 5344.1. And that's from the 229? Is that part of the 229? At a sale value.
I didn't understand your question.
There's debt.
Oh, okay.
Are you talking about the order regarding the foreclosure? That page?
What the town will net from the sale.
But you're getting your debt amount from the page that has a docket number. Town of Stratford versus
Okay.
Gratz Geraldine. I just want to know where you're getting your figure from.
It's on after the listings of all the
Yeah,
properties.
this thing here.
Yeah.
Okay. Right?
Right.
So you have debt of $38,471, you have attorney fees of $14,970.
Right.
Why we have that? So that's a total of $53.41, and then you have appraisal fee, a title search fee.
And a fair market.
That's not that much, but it would go up to maybe $53,900, like that.
Yep.
And that would come off the $229,000,
That was my question. Thank you.
right? Is that, am I saying it? Okay.
I think it may. I can't say for sure, because honestly speaking, this is more about, whether you approve of the sale or not, and not the fixed dollar amount at this point. It might change, like the appraiser had said. And I think it's very straightforward, whether you approve of the sale or not. In some cases, what happens is if it's a town-owned property and you want to use it for recreational purpose, or you want to build a library on it, and if they're putting out for sale, then, you would have an objection to that. But in this case, I think it's just a small residential property.
and it'll get back. Yes. Second it. Any further discussion? Otherwise, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, so that was unanimous. Moving right along, discussion of 5.3 of the zoning regulations. I think we're going to hold that off because there's nothing more. Number 6 is erosion and sediment control plan, nothing on that. And now we go to the bond release request for 775 Lordship,
Yes.
partial bond release. Is that,
Yes. Shall I go ahead?
okay, you want to explain that to us?
Sure. Especially to Commissioner Zalik, who wasn't part of our discussions previously. There was this applicant representing 775 Lordship Boulevard property who had this approvals to build from a few years ago. It's right in front of the FedEx building on Lordship, right near Access Road. At that time, he was asked to post a bond because, you know, he was unable to do the necessary sidewalk improvements. And he had to perform other drainage improvements on site too. So now when a few months ago he came back and he said he's willing to do sidewalks for a portion of the property, but the remaining he can't do because of the topography of the site. And after we all discussed, we agreed that it's okay for him to actually post a bond for that portion of property where he is unable to build sidewalks, because at this time, we don't anticipate anything happening in that section there by Access Road and this federal wetlands and marshland over there. But now he has asked me, because he posted roughly 80,000 or more in the bond, and now he's going to build a portion of the sidewalks, and the remaining, where he's building, he wants the bonds to be released. So that's why I got back to the exact amount of $46,400, because the town engineer appraised the value of the sidewalk bond to be $40,400. And his original cash bond was, the remaining amount in his original cash bond was $86,800. So he would like to take his $46,400 back.
But the town retains $40,400
Yes.
in the sidewalk fund.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Watson?
Isn't our usual practice that we don't give those bonds back until the work is done?
Well, we voted to say it's okay for him to build the sidewalk. So the portion where he's building, he wants the money. Mhm.
But we're not giving it to
No.
until we see completed.
No. Mhm.
I just think that should be very clear.
Yes. So just to make a note, the secretary must note the amount in the meeting minutes, otherwise finance department will not approve of that.
46,400 bond release.
Partial bond release.
Partial. All right, the town retains 40,400.
Mhm.
Mr. Staley?
I'm not sure what you're saying after the work is
After
completed.
he puts the sidewalks in the section that he's doing.
Okay, so the 40,400 is going into a contingency fund for future.
Yes.
And,
The other half.
and that's been looked at by our engineers, and the price
Yes.
is,
Mhm.
right?
Yes. They had a clear estimation sheet that showed what needs to go in order to build that sidewalk there,
Mhm.
and they estimated at 40,400.
Thank you.
That is what, that's the way it normally is. You don't, your bond is not returned until you've completed. It's always been here.
Mr. Staley, okay, I wasn't sure what that was.
Okay, yes, hello. So it's my understanding that from when the original bond was given to the town of Stratford, there was some give back, and now they're looking at 40,400 to remain with the town of Stratford, take their 46, and that 40,400 will go into contingency fund, not necessarily for that location, but for walks.
It goes into a sidewalk
Right.
account, yes.
So we don't wait for that 40,400 to be done to release the bond.
I don't know if you remember how the site was, but there was this access way into the property and the FedEx property behind that is right almost in the middle. And the right side of the property between the entrance to the property and the adjacent retail, that will be built because that's fairly simple to build. The other side between access road and the left side of the entrance to the property is topographically sloping, and it is a road that's leading to nowhere because there is no retail beyond that. And we deliberated on this at our commission meeting like 2 months ago, and we discussed and said, okay, he needs to post a bond for this. But then he doesn't have to post a new bond. That would cost $40,400. He doesn't have to post a new bond because few years ago, he posted a bond of $124,800 for sewer improvements, sidewalk, and inspection fee and other things. So when he completed the sewer improvements, he got his $38,000 back, which brought down the amount to $86,800. Now the town retains that amount in the bank account, and he's asking, can I get my $46,400 back because you don't need it, because I'm building the sidewalk. And for the portion that I'm not building the sidewalk, you can retain the $40,400 based on the engineering department's estimate. So if you guys are okay with that,
Do you understand
we,
that?
Basically, it's 80,000, 40,
yes.
giving it back
For us,
because it's gonna build the sidewalks.
up until that,
The other 40, we're gonna keep spending.
exactly.
He posted a cash bond with the finance department.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to do a partial bond release in the amount of $46,400 and for the town to retain $40,400 in the sidewalk account. Thank you. Second, okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? That's unanimous. Okay, that one's done. Now, we go to implementation plans, the Greenway project. I don't think we have any news on that, right, because they didn't have a meeting.
I would like to add something regarding that. I mean, I was expressing some concerns on the Greenway Committee, not updating staff on their meetings, at least a day in advance. And I just want to bring that concern again because Greenway Committee is a subcommittee of the Planning Commission. And as a staff to the Planning Commission, I myself do not know when the meetings are happening, when they're canceling. Like like even this month's meeting, like last month's meeting, it was canceled like an hour before our workday ended, like around 3:30, and I got an email through the town engineer and not from the secretary. I do not have information on contacting these members. I think there's a lot happening along those lines in the town, like we are trying to apply for phase 2 of Greenway funding, and we're also doing complete streets planning. I really want to get them involved in these processes, but there is no way I can get them involved if I'm not informed when the meetings are happening and how to communicate with their members.
Just a point of information, we're pretty sure the secretary didn't know the meeting was
She did.
canceled.
In fact, I was going to substitute for her because she was really sick. She called me at like 3:30 and begged me to substitute. I said,
Oh.
okay, I
Yes, and
And then she
it's,
finally found out that there was no meeting.
it's also point to note for the record is that the secretary's mother is ill, and I really sympathize with her situation. It's not that she's done something that, she missed a date or something. It's just the lack of coordination between the staff and the committee. There is no channel of communication, so if one person falls ill, there is no way that the other person would know how to pick another alternative in that course. There should be something like how we function here,
Right.
like
Well,
there should be a better mechanism.
yeah, but the point I'm trying to make, it really isn't the secretary.
It's just
the
the
chair of
committee.
the committee, so, who is Linda Pepin. So I will, I said I would discuss this. I've tried to get a hold of Linda Pepin, and I will sit down with her, and we'll come to an understanding of what we're going to do.
They're subject to the same rules and regulations.
Yes, they are. Absolutely.
And should they be reporting to us on a regular basis if they're a subcommittee?
Well, we have, Commissioner Watson is a liaison. Of course, he didn't know of the meeting either, so that created a problem. And Mr. Staley is interested in being an alternate for him. So these are all things that, yes, there's a breakdown in the committee structure, and we're going to fix it. Mr. Watson, did you, or Mr. Staley? Who's going to
comment?
go first?
Question, the interested in. We talked about this, I thought it was approved, but you wanted to check with someone prior to approval of my alternate to Mr. Watson.
No, this committee approved you,
Right.
and that's all that had to happen.
Oh, I thought you said you were gonna
All we
check.
had to do is, no, I don't think so.
Okay.
But once you were approved by this, what I had to do was tell Linda Pepin,
Okay.
okay?
Ma-
But there was supposed to be a meeting, it got canceled, so there was no formal, at their meeting, they weren't informed you were going to be an alternate, because they didn't have a meeting, okay? But that would be the next step. Yes, Ms. Watson?
Before I became an alternate on planning, I was a member of the Greenway Committee.
Right.
I was accepted as a member. I was a voting member of the Greenway Committee. Somehow, things changed when I became a member of planning, and I was only accepted as a guest. So I think that that planning should say that we have the right to have someone sit as a member, because it's totally at their whim whether they want to listen to me or not, or even allow me a voting privilege.
No, that's not correct. That may be their interpretation, but the Planning Commission appoints the Greenway Committee. We have appointed you as a member and Mr. Staley as an alternate. It is not up to them to decide whether you are or are not a member of the committee.
I asked if you could forward that information.
That's what I said. I plan on talking to Linda Pepin and discuss these issues that you brought up when we met last week.
And in fairness to
discuss it.
the Greenway Committee, it's a long-standing committee. There are people there that have dedicated themselves over decades of working on to make it happen. So I don't fault them. I just think, I've said it beginning of this year, that the two need to change. I had suggested that we create a Greenway/Complete Streets committee that can recognize that those two are, they're one and the same once they start getting built out.
Yes, and I agree, and the reason I want them to be on board is because we are moving forward swiftly with Complete Streets designs, and I did speak with George Perham, the chair of Complete Streets Committee. I conveyed to him whatever we discussed, which we'll get into the next item, but I'm unable to discuss the same with the Greenway Committee chair, which is a disservice to them, because
Yes.
they're a long-standing committee, and I should be able to communicate with them whatever is happening.
Well, at the beginning of the year, when it was brought up by Commissioner Watson that we should combine the Greenway Committee and Complete Streets. I know I agreed with Commissioner Watson, but the administrator, Jay Hibansky, was concerned about doing that. In fact, we had a meeting with committee member and chair Linda Pepin at the time. Has Mr. Hibansky's position changed?
Could I
Should we
comment?
vote to combine these two committees or to go through the process of combining them?
I have to talk to him. I don't know
Okay.
anything about it.
Could
so
I
I have to discuss with
comment?
him.
Okay,
On that,
yeah,
I've actually had conversations with Jay, and he said that initially, when I brought it up, he was not in favor of it.
right.
But he realizes that, particularly with funding, that it becomes really critical that we have one voice. That we have a Greenway that's able to function for both Greenway projects that we're paying for and Complete Street projects that we're getting funded. That it's really, that he finally understood when I kept talking about a network. And he said, you're right. He said, I didn't really, he said, I was thinking much more strictly of Todd. And he said, while we need to focus on the Todd project that we have funded right now, we also have funded Elm Street, which is not the Todd, because it goes all the way down. So we need to keep all of that working together. So he said he felt like that combining the two would actually work better. But he said, based that on the experience.
I would research the town ordinance, the code, to see how they were formed, the Greenway Committee and the Complete Streets Committee. And if they have a set of rules that says this committee should comprise of these individuals, this is how these are formed, and that's how Complete Streets has been formed. Before we can suggest anything, we have to go back to the council to make sure that both are combined, and that's a process that we have to adopt. So it all starts there.
Yeah, if you can research what the process is, and if there's an agreement that the two groups should be combined, then let's find out what the process is and move forward on it. But in the meantime, I will discuss with Linda Pepin, the Greenway Committee, and quite honestly, because this, I thought, was taken care of at the beginning of the year, it obviously hasn't. If we have to, we will reconstitute the Greenway Committee and, maybe have a combination of some of the long-serving members, but with some new people who are going to follow all the regulations of the town.
Could I-
Because they're
What-
supposed to follow, as you said, Commissioner Zalik, they're supposed to follow the rules.
You have to on that because you'll be on camera.
Would it be a good idea to formally write them a memo instead of just having a discussion, so it's on the record that we've?
Well, let's see, let's start with one, and if we're not going, if it seems like not a good conversation, then yes, we will, if it's okay with all the commissioners, we will write them a letter stating our intent.
May I make one final comment?
Yes.
If you go into Complete Streets, into their best practices, it actually suggests that you combine all of this, that you need, in order to develop a Complete Streets policy that is highly effective and can speak in one voice, that you need to basically combine the two for that network.
That may be, but
approach.
there is a process of how these two committees were assigned, and we have to follow the process in order to combine them. So we're not disagreeing, and that's probably a good point to be discussed, but, we have to start off by understanding who appointed the Complete Streets and how it was appointed, because we know how the Greenway Project Committee was appointed. But if you could research that,
And it has a lot of the same members on both committees.
it may very well. Yeah.
May I make a suggestion? I think instead of having them meet separately, inviting them to they meet once in 3 months, so whenever they meet, inviting them to the Planning Commission meeting and discussing the Greenway Committee as an agenda item, and having the subcommittee meet here and discuss with the rest of the commission members would be a better idea, so that, they can communicate better with us. And, sometimes what other towns do is they move the item to the top of the agenda after the public hearings, and then the first item that is heard is the Greenway Committee, and then that way you're hearing them on a regular basis, and it's not like interim basis.
Can we discuss that some more?
Yes.
Because I can see some logical, rational reasoning for that, but I could also see our meetings becoming, either their meetings becoming very short or our meetings becoming very long, trying to, especially as they get into more details about the Greenway Committee. I'm not sure that's the best way to do it, but it's certainly one way of getting us all communicating and on board. But I'd like to pursue some other ways first before we get there. But we'll keep that in mind. And since they were supposed to meet in August? Is that right? August?
Last week.
Then they wouldn't be meeting until November. So we have a little time to either put that in place or reconstitute the group, or whatever we need to do, combine the two groups. Personally, I think combining the two groups is the best way to go forward, but let's see how that works out. Okay? And then we'll get back to that. Is there anything else on Greenway or Complete Streets?
On September 7th, there is Phoenix Festival at Shakespeare property in the morning between 10 and 1, I think, the first 3 hours after the festival opens. We would be having an informational booth on Complete Streets at this festival, right by the entrance. So please feel free to stop by. We are discussing with the consultants on how best to engage the residents, especially children, on bicycle safety, wearing helmets. We would have a certified bike trainer there, and a feedback board where people can post stickies on what they would like to see in the town in terms of biking and walking, and making it bike-friendly and walk-friendly. I'm also hoping to bring the revised drawings of Complete Streets to this booth and put them on board so people can see the concepts and understand them, for those that haven't had an opportunity to know what these are. And we'd have some brochures to give away on, sharing the road, being street smart. And also, I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to share the brochure on flooding, because September is Emergency Preparedness Month, and hurricanes and storms are only a month away from us, so educating people about how to stay safe. So please, you're welcome. I would have some of the town documents there, too, for public to look at and then ask any questions. The consultants were also saying that they might bring tablets to take feedback, live feedback, and feed them into the system, like an online survey questionnaire, which would be cool, but I haven't vetted this thoroughly with the consultants. This is sponsored by the state of DOT, and the grant is administered through Capital Region Council of Governments and in partnership with our Metropolitan Council of Governments. You're welcome to stop by.
Very good, thanks.
And we
Thanks for
also
doing that.
had a discussion with the BSC Group consultants regarding the revised concepts for Complete Streets. And looks like most of the comments that were raised at the meeting where we had with all the committees and commissions that are relevant to this topic have been addressed and taken care of, and now he's going to roll out the revised drawings for us.
Mr. Watson.
Have we heard back from DOT on their revisions?
Well, the first round we did hear back, but we heard them back so late that our concepts have actually revised, and most of their comments were invalid because they were already either addressed or the concepts changed. Now we are sending back the second round of comments, and this time this may happen like in the next week or so, because we just had our meeting last week. And hopefully that, we want this, with the intent that we get this okay to commit to additional funding to fund the remaining portion. And if we get that commitment, then we are good to go.
Okay, so that's Fleet Streets. We go on to Coastal Resiliency Plan.
Happy to inform you that we are now officially a Class 8 community with 10% reduction on national flood insurance policies for all property owners in floodplains and special flood hazard areas of the town. FEMA folks came down and presented a plaque to the town council earlier this month, and the mayor released this news in the press, which I enclosed for your review. I'm sure, like this, I wasn't part of the original discussions with this group, but I know that you guys were champions for this program, so just wanted to thank you all for your hard work. And I also met with Mike Downs, our press release officer in the town, and I'm trying to discuss ways to educate people and inform them about flooding preparedness, flood safety, flooding mitigation. There are 6 points that we need to touch based on FEMA's requirements for CRS program. 1 is to know your flood risk, 2 is to protect your life, 3 is to protect your property, 4 is to, purchase insurance, and 5 is to, pay attention to emergency warning signs and, mitigate your property, plan accordingly. And 6 is like the same thing, where you can retreat, you retreat. So each one touches a topic, 1 economy, the other life, the other property, the other natural environment. Based on those 6 topics, the informational messages have to be released, and they have to be phased out in a manner that public can digest it, instead of sending all messages at once. So I enclosed a draft program for public information schedule along with the mayor's news release on the following pages. And this is something that was developed for other towns and cities in Connecticut, and I just took that as an example to develop for Stratford. And I laid out who the target audiences are, who's the responsible entity, what will be the implementation schedule. So I am going to discuss this draft with the press information officer here too, Mike Downs, communications officer, I would say. But if you have any questions or thoughts after you've read this, please let me know, and I will try to address this. And we should officially adopt the schedule so that every month when we discuss the Coastal Resiliency Plan, we're looking at which month, what message has to go out, who is the responsible entity, and has it been done or not done yet. And if it has been done, we have to document it as part of our CRS maintenance program.
Sure.
During Storm Sandy, I live on the river, and I had really no damage or flood risk. It didn't impact my property. Did we have areas in Stratford that were poorly impacted or badly impacted by?
Stratford wasn't as badly hit as Milford
was
or
bad.
New Haven and other towns were. But that doesn't mean that Stratford wouldn't be hit hard, because I have images, and actually, in fact, you can go online and look at them too. If you Google search Lordship storm events, you will see all these pictures of wreckage
In Lordship.
in Lordship, and
Okay.
it's not uncommon to happen. So considering that you got lucky one time doesn't mean that it doesn't work
Yeah.
next time.
So we also know during Sandy, the berm at the water pollution plant was almost breached.
Yeah. I mean, it came up high. It was right up my wall.
Yes.
Well, it was right up, I think they were within a few inches of,
Yeah.
which would have caused all kinds of problems, but fortunately, it did not breach, but that is a
Have we
concern.
raised that?
That's something I wanted to bring to your attention to. We applied for a pre-disaster mitigation funding grant with FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, in 2017. Our town engineer applied for it. He hasn't heard back from them for the past 2 years. Then after I came on board, I started chasing FEMA too. And then the good news is finally FEMA folks decided to proceed with the next step of this application process. So what they said is the application is complete and it looks like it's a solid application to fund, but then they wanted to know if any permits are required from DEEP, which is Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. DEEP folks said they would work in tandem with FEMA and the town staff to provide any permits that are necessary because it's a disaster that could be avoided.
Right.
So everyone seems to agree, and now the next step is FEMA folks want to meet with town staff and DEEP and Department of Hazard Mitigation Services staff. And I would like to invite our consultant and our engineer and our our planning and zoning administrator, and maybe possibly also invite Metropolitan Council of Governments representative who is actually managing our draft hazard mitigation plan. Not draft, it'll be official soon, but it was approved by FEMA. And so to coordinate and schedule this meeting would take some time, but looks like it may finally happen, and we may finally see that being elevated.
That'll be awesome.
That was the number one priority in our coastal resiliency report from 2017. That was the one thing they said before we do anything else that we need to
Right.
tend to.
Not just because of the environment, but because of the, tens of millions of dollars we spent less than 20 years ago, right? Upgrading.
Correct, and of course, the effect of Sandy,
Right.
the storm Sandy had on almost breaching the berm.
That would be a disaster.
That would have been a disaster. We were one of the few on the East Coast, Northeast, weren't we, Mr. Watson, that did not breach?
Excuse me? We were the only sewage, yes, on the Long Island Sound that did not. We actually made it through.
So we might not have
We
been
were
one
very fortunate.
another time. So,
Okay, before we go home,
what did I
we did
forget?
the bond release. We didn't make a motion to waive the rules, to put it on, because it's not on the. can we
Oh,
just
see,
do that?
it's on mine.
I was, yeah, well, because it's written on.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe we should just go back and just make a motion to waive the rules.
Okay, so we have a process issue here. On number 7, the bond release request, if you look on your original agenda, it did not say 775 Lordship partial bond release. So we have to start with a motion to waive the rules. So moved by Sandra Zalick, you've done this before. Can I have a second? Mr. Staley? Okay, any discussion? All in-
I do have to raise a point,
I'm
because
glad
I
you
was
did.
thinking about this. If Sandra was not here when they came before us, does that mean that she should not vote on this?
She could still waive the rules.
Okay. I just want to make sure if we're trying to,
No,
I thought you have to
No,
be present if there has been a presentation and you then vote on it. You have to have been present at their presentation in
yeah,
order
but
for
we
it to be.
approved releasing the bond, we just didn't know the amount.
Okay,
And this is to actually set
do it.
the dollar amount.
so then we're okay.
Yeah. It's not anything new. We approved, the commission approved at one of our meetings previously that we would release the bond. The question was the amount. There was some concern as to the amount.
So
So that's
was
that's
just
what we're doing
informational.
today, is actually the dollar amount. Yeah. So, all in favor of waiving the rules?
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor, very good, thank you, okay?
now we can vote on this.
So do we have to vote again on?
Yeah, we
no.
do.
Wait,
I think
Nah.
we
I
do.
think we better take care of it.
Yeah, let's do it
again.
right.
Let's just do it again.
Okay, so we have a motion that was,
the partial, Ms. Salick, voted for partial bond release in the amount of, $46,400, and, for the town's gonna keep $40,400 for the sidewalk,
right, and that was seconded
Mr. Watson.
by Mr. Watson. Okay, okay, Mr. Watson?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any further discussion? Otherwise, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody oppose? Thank you, that's unanimous. Thanks for keeping us honest. Okay, are we done with coastal resilience?
Yes, has anybody had a chance to look at the schedule? Okay, what do you think in general? Any thoughts?
The PIP? I didn't get a chance to look at it.
Okay, let me go back.
Would you be able to review that and send me your thoughts and comments in the next 1 or 2 weeks
I can't-
by email? The schedule that I gave for sending messages to town residents on
The program for public
program
information.
for public information, please review that, and I'm
Could I try
out-
to help you out? Because a lot of this is exactly out of the resiliency project.
Yes.
So it's not new to anybody who's read the resiliency project. Could we just go ahead and vote on this? You essentially are giving information to the public on a monthly basis, and you're giving information to them in a defined category. All we could really do here is discuss the wording or discuss the order, and I think that you know what you're doing on
Are you making a motion?
I'm going to
Mr.
make a
Watson?
motion that we say yes to this schedule, and we move forward with it to the good of our town.
So you're motioning to adopt,
I'm motioning to adopt the public outreach projects and responsibilities schedule as presented on the 20th of August.
thank you, Ms. Figliotti. Any discussion? Because I know it's new.
The next thing is to form a PPI committee.
Did
And-
we vote on that?
Not yet.
Oh,
So when we do after you guys adopt this today, after you vote on this today, I will go back and look at what comprises a PPI committee to maintain good standing with the CRS program, and what, it has some specific requirements like 1 town staff, 2 elected representatives, and, citizen representatives and all. Then I'll come back for another vote for that.
That'll be to constitute the committee.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but right now, we're voting on adopting this program for public information plan.
I have a question.
Sure.
If we vote to approve it today, does that mean it's written in stone? It can't be altered? It can't be altered. Then if it's planning to be altered, why would we vote on it?
It can be altered, but you're giving me a green signal to go ahead with the first step on putting information out there.
Okay.
So once it's officially adopted, I will take it to the communications officer, and I will say, this is official, now we can go ahead and do this. But doesn't mean that you don't like a certain message. You're welcome to alter it and say, can we do this instead of this? And then we have to go back and re-vote on that amended document.
It's a plan, it's a guideline,
Okay.
which can always be adjusted, as we go along.
Would it be appropriate for me to abstain since I haven't looked at it?
None of us have seen this,
Then why are we voting on it?
unless,
No, I read it.
right now,
I read it this morning. We got an e-packet.
I didn't get anything.
This will affect our standing on our FEMA,
I didn't
on
get
the new zoning, on the
No.
new insurance reductions. This is all adding up to making Stratford be essentially Class 1, which will never get there. We're currently Class 8, but it took us a lot of work to get to Class 8. So this is one of the components that will address them to saying, yes, we're doing what we say we're going to do. It was clearly outlined in coastal resiliency as one of our first primary steps that we need to take. So I think that theoretically, we're supposed to have this done this year, correct?
First of all, how many of you didn't receive my email with the attachments? I sent the whole package on Friday. Mr. Staley said he got it.
I got it.
Mr. Watson got it, and Mr. Vigliotti got it.
I got it, but I didn't.
You
I
didn't
didn't
review this.
No.
So you didn't get it at all.
I didn't get an email.
Well, maybe your email blocked because of the size
That
of
could
the
be.
document, because I sent it to the Planning Commission group email.
I believe it.
So
I'm just,
if this is the case, then I think I don't mind waiting another month so that everybody has read and come back, and maybe we vote on everything together on the committee and this and everything else together. We're still doing our outreach anyway. Like I said, at the Phoenix Festival, distributing brochures on flood information. We're doing, press releases and all that. So that doesn't deter us from doing those kind of things, but to hold workshops in targeted neighborhoods, we need an official approval so that it is documented as part of our CRS maintenance program. So if some of the commission members aren't comfortable, I don't mind waiting for another month until everybody has read it.
Mr. Staley.
Okay, so the outreach projects and responsibilities program, this is a, so you can have workshops in the areas of concern. And these are all documented. A floodplain?
Yes.
Okay.
We must document these because the insurance agent would come back to see how well we are doing with the CRS program and recertify us at that time. And if we don't have adequate documentation, then we don't maintain the rating that we have been awarded initially. So it's like we've committed to educate people, and now it's our job to keep implementing that program.
Implementing the education.
The education and awareness activity out of the community rating system program. The CRS program has 4 or 5 activities. 300 series is public information, 400 series is open space management, 500 series is emergency management, and 600 series is dams protection. So as part of 300 series public information, there's a range of activities that we have to do, and this falls under that category to maintain that rating.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second, and I guess people have read this, but.
I could add to
Except-
that.
let's-
I could add to that simply adding to what I had previously said, that we give planning and zoning administrator leeway to revise as needed based on current situations.
Town planner,
Town planner, what did I say?
planning and zoning administrator.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's what I had. I was counting you
You
both.
got promoted, congratulations.
If that will help any.
Say it again.
That we give, I'll just say, our town planning administrator, the leeway to, our town planner, the leeway to make revisions as needed to implement this schedule. That then gives you the ability to change it. I assume you're going to come back and tell us what you're doing and how you've changed it.
Okay. Commissioner Zalik, do you feel not comfortable voting on this, or vote?
I'll vote on it with
Okay.
that amendment.
Okay.
We have a second.
So we have an amended motion
I'll
and a
look at it.
second.
I did risk assessments and work, so.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Otherwise, we'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. Another thing done. Okay. Anything else on coastal resiliency?
That's it. And for the record, since Commissioner Zalik is new to this, and I would like to bring her up to speed on what we've been doing regarding the CRS program. So I would set up a meeting with her and go over all the work that has been done before she came into this committee, and then moving forward, what remains to be done, so she becomes a very engaged partner of this program.
Very good. Okay. Other items, digital sign ordinance. Now, we have something here from the town attorney. We have some pictures that I believe Commissioner Staley took of Old Saybrook, right?
Nice pictures.
I see the pictures, but what's the town attorney thing?
The first email is from Alexander Florek, who's the town attorney. Before that.
And basically, he is saying that it's premature for him to make any legal opinion until we give him some final language. And to that end, at the beginning of this meeting, I handed out a revised, is this a text amendment? Right, text amendment that we've been working on for the last 2 or 3 months for Commissioner Zalick's edification. Basically, what we've been trying to do is come up with a text amendment for a municipal electronic message sign to be allowed, because right now we do not allow any electronic signs in town. So we're looking to allow these electronic message signs on property owned by the town of Stratford at Paradise Green and West Broad Green, and used for municipal and not-for-profit organizations that can contain or consist of patterns of illumination which form words, symbols, or other messages which are altered more than every 5 minutes, and displaying a logo and/or alphanumeric characters against a solid color contrasting background, the characters of which can be electronically changed by remote or automatic means. That's the definition. And then we go into some of the regulations. So why don't we start off with Susmitha, if you have any comments?
Yes. First of all, I would like to thank Commissioner Staley for taking the time to go visit Old Saybrook and taking pictures, wonderful pictures for us. And I apologize I couldn't schedule a one-on-one with you. It's just been a crazy month. If you look at the town attorney's email to me, the last paragraph says that constitutional arise because commercial speech is constitutionally protected speech, especially in the context where the government is determining which speakers are entitled to be heard. Broadly speaking, in order to regulate and limit commercial speech, the government must identify a substantial government interest for doing so. By this, he means that we have to identify what interests are we trying to protect by promoting a digital sign on the town property, which restricts some of the town residents from using this, and not all of the town residents can use it. So, First Amendment, right to freedom to speak, is going to be affected if you just say that only nonprofits can advertise and not for-profit retailers. I did talk to the town attorney and said, but that's the case anyway now.
I was going to say, that's
Yes,
the regulation now.
Because we have paper boards on, paper signs on town property that are being sponsored only by nonprofits, and businesses don't have a say because that's the town ordinance. The town only allows nonprofits to display their signs on the town property. So we're just essentially trying to put a digital sign in place instead of a paperboard sign.
Right.
And in this case, the government interest that we are trying to protect is to avoid cluttering of paper signs, which are not pleasing. You can argue that you would want to combine everything into one so it looks more aesthetic. But the second thing about driver safety and distraction, there is more driver distraction and traffic concern due to a digital sign than a paperboard sign, because people are of the impression that if there is a paper sign, they can come back anytime and read it, even if they miss the light, like if they're by the traffic light and they just have to drive by, they know that it'll still be there and they can come back. With respect to digital sign, there is a level of uncertainty whether that message would still remain or not, and it's just too attractive. You read half of it, you want to read the entire of it. So there is some concerns, and not that to say that these are dangerous, because like Mr. Staley has observed in Old Saybrook, it did work well in Old Saybrook, and I spoke to the planning and zoning officials there, their zoning enforcement officer. Mr. Staley spoke to them, and everybody assured us that there was nothing drastic that happened. But again, Old Saybrook has a different population size and density compared to Stratford, which is like 5 times more, I think. So it's up to you to decide as a commission what is the substantial government interest. How would you like to do it in a way that you can defend this when zoning commission sends back saying, we don't believe that, your concerns are valid because we think there is serious threat to pedestrian safety or something?
My question would be then, why are there digital signs on every state highway across the country? Because there are, including the state of Connecticut.
That's DOT.
It's still a digital sign on a highway.
But in this case, the town will be liable for any court lawsuits, and it may be fairly reasonable for the town to protect itself. And I'm just putting the options out there, and I'm not trying to discourage. I would still suggest sending the draft ordinance to zoning commission, because the process is, like the town attorney explained in his email, the zoning commission has to refer the text amendments to the planning commission, and then it goes back to the zoning commission again. So that's the process. So if you would want to take a crack at it and send it to zoning, it still would come back to planning, and then it'll go back for a vote.
Well, I thought actually what we were trying to do was to come up with the language, semi-final draft,
Yes.
to send to the different departments, including the police department.
I did send it to economic development and a few others who are concerned with this, like engineering. But I don't mind sending it to other departments like police once we refine the language today. If you would like me to send it to zoning commission, I can send it too. Then we can officially get a text amendment referral from them for next month. And in your cover letter, you might want to state what is the substantial government interest that you would like to protect.
Well, first of all, I'd like to send it to the police department.
We have to revise the language and then send it to the police.
Oh, no,
and
I
then-
understand that.
Yes. Okay, then we'll do that, okay.
But first, we have to finalize this. Now, Mr. Staley, you went and saw Old Saybrook. Do you want to summarize what you know?
Yes,
Spoke to them about?
they've gone a lot further than we have. They've been working on this for years. They're a smaller town, and they want to keep their character. There are some problems that come up in the digital signage, which should be, first, we're recommending only 2 locations. I would just say town property, rather than keeping ourselves at 2 locations.
Oh, well, go ahead.
That's just a comment. They allow community programs that they put on their digital signage, and I think I sent that sign to the commission, the admin here. She has a copy of it. We have, but there are problems with digital signage and everywhere.
Thank you.
Gas stations even. We have a lot of digital signage for gas stations.
I think that's the only digital sign that is allowed, and it's only allowed to change like once a day.
it's allowed to change.
There's
but
rules,
They do have a problem with one they're dealing with in court, where they changed, because the law states that they have to have the most expensive gown up visible. And some people with electronic signs change one at a time, which isn't.
Right,
the
well,
way
that's why we
they-
specifically called this municipal electronic message sign.
Right,
Has nothing to do with gas stations,
okay.
commercial businesses, nothing else.
Okay, well, commercial businesses are also part of the problem.
But they're not affected by this. Right now, no one in the town of Stratford can have an electronic digital sign.
Right. How about in the window?
As far as I know, no. Okay?
Okay.
So all we're saying with this is on a
So we're starting out
municipal
with municipal
property.
only.
Yes.
Okay.
So I understand what you're talking about with the gas.
We have a lot further to go.
And I understand those issues, but that's why we started off with strictly municipal electronic message sign.
Okay.
So I agree there are issues with
Oh, there's many issues. No reason to go into them. We're not there yet.
it. Yeah, save them.
Save them. But I would recommend that we don't hold it to 2 locations.
Can I add to what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay,
I drove a couple weeks ago to Orient Point, and I went through 5 towns, and all 5 towns had electric boards. And some of them had just at their town hall, some of them had it for all of their schools. And the messages were, coming September 10th, the next, get your pencils ready, and the fire department had it. So all of the civic organizations had a simple electric board. Some of them were static, they didn't have any multiple, but some of them were events that were happening in the community. So we could do civic instead of saying specifically the 2, and then say specifically that these boards are for informing the community about events and about government deadlines, or do you know what I mean, about things that are happening in town, about civic events that everybody's invited to, and about emergencies. These are the 3 things that we're going to do. And I don't see how anybody could say that's a constitutional limit on their voice.
I guess the aim, when we started this, is that we are a town that does not allow electronic signs. So we're bucking against
Even doing the 2,
even doing the 2.
yeah.
Yeah. We're pushing the envelope. So it's not that I disagree that we shouldn't have them elsewhere, but that could come down the road.
I will stick with you on that.
I really, I don't want to go pursuing a no. In other words, we change it to any town property and then
But I read
everybody
through
gets
this very
upset.
carefully, and I think this makes sense now. I think all of the revision that's happened over I think, right, I have your revised?
Yeah, that's it.
The only thing that I think we should do, based on our lawyer, Mr. Young Floric, is we could add up here that what the civic purpose of these boards are. And say the 3 things. Say it's for emergencies, it's for town events, and it's for
Well, if-
not-for-profits that are,
If you look on the back on
It is in
number
there?
5, it says, shall be used for special events, community events, emergency notifications, and public service announcements operated by the town of Stratford or a town not-for-profit. And then it defines what special
I
events are.
do not see how there's a constitutional problem in that.
I would suggest Commissioner Patisky to slightly amend that language to say the digital sign shall be used to protect government interests in, reducing clutter caused due to paper boards or something, and to be utilized by, for emergency purposes, to rewrite that sentence in a way that clearly states this is the public interest that we would like to protect through this ordinance.
Yeah, because I
Because later on, it does say that any event signage shall be prohibited from Paradise Green, West Bar Green, including but not limited to A-frames, lawn signs, commercial and business signs, so that and the rationale for that is to reduce the clutter and sign pollution.
To reduce sign pollution and to,
I can add that.
I think,
Go ahead.
to inform people of emergencies in a timely manner,
Okay.
and to remove obsolete signs.
I ask a question. What do we envision so if this were just for town emergency and notification purposes, I would be fine. What do we envision with nonprofits? What are we hoping?
That would be like if you had the fireworks, the town fireworks.
Which is a town, right? A town.
Yeah, but it's not an
notification.
emergency or not, well, it's technically not a notification. Notification, in my mind, would be a safety.
Doesn't have
issue.
to be. Notifying
No.
of events, town events.
Yeah. It depends on how you define notification. Okay, let's go to the nonprofit side. Sterling House is having it's not called a mud run, but it's like a mud
They're
run.
like a quasi-town agency, right?
They're a
We
not-for-profit.
give them money.
That may be, but they're still a not-for-profit. I mean, that's one, okay.
Yeah.
The YMCA has a Sweetheart Run in February at Booth Park.
Yeah.
That is an example of a not-for-profit,
Red Cross Blood Drive.
yeah, that sort of thing.
And why, like these pictures, they're not horrible looking. If we envision doing this, why would we not want businesses to do it?
Because there are multiple businesses in the town, and
Too
then it will be like, it gets too busy and too much competition that cannot be managed by a single entity like the town's ID manager. Even with nonprofits, Old Saybrook staff mentioned that they had to time these in a manner that at least you have the same message for 5 minutes before it flashes off, and then you have
There's
another.
5 seconds in here.
No, this is incorrect. This is our draft. But after speaking with Old Saybrook, we have to revise the draft because 5 seconds is too short a time.
Yeah, you can't read.
So you want to have the same message for at least 5 minutes being played over and over.
It really
So-
just says a minimum of 5 seconds.
But if we,
So
We
could be.
should say 5 minutes.
if we limit the,
Not 5 seconds, because 5 seconds is too short.
if we
It's a
limit.
minimum of 5 seconds.
The minimum should be 5 minutes, not 5 seconds.
Oh.
Because-
would
But if we,
disagree with
If
that.
you had 5 seconds,
We had this
I think
discussion.
5 minutes is too
We're
long.
having the same thing over.
Let's sit
If
here
we
and wait 5
limit-
minutes.
if we limit
Having
the number of positions
everybody
that we can put these in, my question is really, why can't anybody put something on the sign if they reserve a time or something?
That's how it would be envisioned.
Yeah.
They would reserve through some system put together.
Right, so my question about businesses for profit is not that they have them everywhere, but if they utilize these 2 or 4, whatever we
because
allow.
businesses have their own signs, they have their own marketing on their site. And typically, they do take care of their own marketing. Nonprofits are the ones that are pretty underfunded, and they're the ones that want to draw larger crowds to events.
Okay.
And that's why.
And
trying to help.
I'm not saying because I disagree, I'm trying to speak to our town
First
attorneys.
Amendment,
It's also
Concern.
a public service as opposed to a business service. The signs are meant to be for everyone, whereas a business might be just for
Right.
one small group.
So could that be our
Also-
argument to the attorney that this is for a public service?
That, I would think that could be one of the,
Well,
A
and an
community
emergency
service.
service.
Yeah.
may I add to that?
Yeah, could I just one other
Okay.
thing to that point? There's a lot more businesses in the town of Stratford than there are not-for-profits.
Yeah.
So when you consider the number of signs and information that would be
Yeah.
up there, it would be undoable, you
Yeah.
know.
No, and again, I don't want
Right.
for-profits to do it. I'm just trying to talk out what our attorney is concerned about.
If I can give her a little bit of background on this, we are not looking at anything that is pole mounted. We're looking at ground mounted signs not covering 50% of the facade of that structure, like you see in the images that were shared by Mr. Staley. And we're looking at something that has an image that's not too flashing. It's just, you know, it just goes, it rotates over, like slides from one end to the other, and you know, the words come back again. And the reason I said it should be at least 5 minutes and not 5 seconds, Chair Petusky, is because I spoke to the Old Saybrook staff who said that the 5-minute window for the same message to appear over and over in that 5-minute cycle would give enough time for people to digest the information. If they've missed it, they know they can come back, they can look at it, they can take a turn and come back and review it. The 5 seconds may be quick, and that may be the cause of driver distraction. And also, for them, it's a matter of regulating the number of messages. Like if you took 5 minutes per message, in an hour, you're getting like 60 by 5, like how many, 12 messages per hour. And in 24 hours, again, 12 multiplied by 24, like around 250 messages. That's a lot, and they say that their bandwidth is only for that much. But if you have minimum of 5 seconds, then somebody says, okay, my message is only 10 seconds long, and then you'll have another message, and the capacity to feed messages into that system would be more, and also the bandwidth of the staff would decrease in managing these signs. So that's why, to limit the number of messages, to reduce driver distraction, they suggested to have at least 5 minutes long, and not in the colors that are too flashy, but maybe having white, or you know, during Christmas having red, something like that.
Okay. Mr. Watson, you wanted to say something. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I don't know what I wanted to say. I feel like we are discussing the same points over and over again, that we really need to move this forward. The purpose was to offer a new service, particularly since we no longer have a daily newspaper. We no longer have any real source to find events that are happening we don't even print the Parks and Rec events thing anymore. So a lot of people don't know what's happening. And in terms for our civic life to be rich, we need to make sure that people see things that are happening. Not-for-profits are not for profit. They don't have the money to spend to do this, and it's a service that we could do to them to help them do a better job at what they do. I just think that we limited ourselves. We've done everything we can to make this be a right project. There are going to be always people who are going to speak against it, but this was a demo project. This was a way to say, let's put something out there so we can see if it works. Does it help our town? My suggestion is let's move this thing forward and find out how we can get it to move forward. My comment is the whole idea of unconstitutionality, I think, is a canard. It makes no sense, and there are a million other towns with the same kind of signs, and we have a existing code that says that we don't allow electronic signs. All we're doing is giving exception to the town. That's it.
Mr.
Well, thank you. I agree, we should move this forward. It did start out as a beta test, and we chose 2 locations based on where most of the signage was left, and but I just think even in our beta test, we should word it a little differently. You did mention that the profits could also put something on by,
No.
excuse me?
Only nonprofits, not
Well,
for-profit.
they're not going to have any control of this.
Well, this is how the process works. And if a nonprofit prefers to display a message on the town property, like the West Broad Green or the Paradise Green, then they should contact the Planning and Zoning Office for a permit, like a regular sign permit. and the planning and zoning office would refer to the ordinance to see if they comply with the ordinance requirements. And then the zoning officer is required to sign off on that. And once he signs off on that, perhaps somebody else in the town hall should take the responsibility, whether it's police or fire or IT, to take the message in and feed it into the system so that it displays on the sign that is put on the property, and ensure that it is compliant with all requirements. And if something's not working, notify the property owner in 24 hours so they can come back and revise the message or, fix the problem.
Property owner?
Property owner is the town of Stratford.
No, the property owner, the nonprofit representative who's applied for the permit for the sign, who is displaying the message, must come and work with the IT staff if there is a problem in their sign that's being displayed. And if it's not showing correctly, or, if the message is no longer relevant for some reason.
I'm not understanding if the sign is not properly displayed.
I would say, if there are any technical issues with the sign, and it's...
The electronic sign.
Yes, the electronic sign.
If the image is
They have to work with the IT manager.
But there's only going to be two right now we're talking about.
Yes.
So why would there be a problem with the
Well,
sign?
we don't know why would there be a problem.
It's just
but if
their
there is a
verbiage they have to
problem-
put on according to the First Amendment, you said.
But the problem wouldn't be what's on the sign. It's the sign itself malfunctioning.
Well, sometimes if the message is no longer relevant and they haven't, taken it down.
They don't have to take it down.
They don't. We take it down. The
This is
town,
all automated.
So we are assuming that we are increasing the responsibility of somebody in the town hall to manage this. And that has to be,
well, that's why this should go through the departments
and they
and the
have,
mayor's office to decide,
Yes.
what they want to do.
and the
There has to be
thing,
a point person on this.
Yeah,
so there
it's
are,
not our job to determine.
No.
there are two ways of dealing this issue. One is to just get the ordinance done, because as a planning commission, we have authority only to that extent, not on the management of the other staff in the town hall or what their roles and responsibilities must be. Just including this piece on digital signs in the sign ordinance and leaving it there, and whoever wishes to come and apply and, put a sign on the town property, whether it's the town hall or a nonprofit or a
I'm not
private
getting that
entity,
part.
they should work with the, town staff to
This
figure
is
out
the
who
part
will operate.
I'm not understanding. I'm understanding we're going to put two signs up, beta tests, get rid of the A-frames and the eye pollution. Right, the town owns the signs. Somebody puts an application and they want this on, and
Town
this is the date, and this is the date, they're accepted or not for whatever reason, and then the administrator of the signage puts it on, not them.
Yes, town doesn't own the signs that are on the property, the paper boards, they're
Why not?
nonprofits. Nonprofits come and put, if there is somebody like Sterling House who has an art event, they come and put the sign on town property. Town just owns the property.
I'm talking digital.
Well, we're talking, when we have a digital sign, the town owns it.
And we feed the message onto it, or whoever the administrator.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
You're assuming that town would own it,
right.
but I am saying that I would leave the decision to the elected official, whether they want to own it or they want to lease it to some private entity to operate it. And
That's up to them.
beyond us.
Right.
All we're saying
suggesting
is
is
we're
to-
allowing the town to do it.
If somebody wants to do this, what's the mechanism to do it? We are only framing the ordinance, and we would leave it there. The second part that we have written on how it has to be, applied for and permitted for, I would completely take it off from the zoning regulation. Because at this point, we don't know if the elected official is interested in owning the sign and managing it, or he or she wants to lease it to a private entity to manage it totally on their own because of lack of staff.
Bottom line is, we put this out to the departments, to the mayor. If she doesn't want to do it, she doesn't have to do it. Nobody's forcing anybody to do anything. We're saying you have the ability to do it. You have our permission to do it. They're allowed. But the mayor may come back and say, okay, that's fine, it's on the books, I don't want to do it.
So,
She doesn't have to do it.
exactly, if I don't have the copy, I lent my copy to her, so can we share this? I just want to tell you that this will definitely be okay, I think, with the zoning commission or anybody, like, I'm hoping that there will be no red light, like, no stops there. If you completely ignore the second part of this, which said application for electronic sign permit, because we don't know who will own and manage this. So taking this off of the ordinance and just doing the first part, saying we encourage electronic message signs on the town property only, and we want these signs to be in a certain way, and just leaving it there. And when somebody comes with an interest to do that, they're,
No.
The only group that can do this is the town of Stratford. It's town of Stratford property. They're the only people who could put something on the town of Stratford, unless the town of Stratford permits it.
they have to lease it to somebody else.
They don't have to.
If they don't have the staff capacity, they could.
They could, they don't have to.
They don't have to, but if they wanted to, the way we wrote it here says Town of Stratford.
No, the only thing it says is that the town of Stratford has to submit the application to the zoning,
And
go
if,
through the process of,
yes, and what I'm trying to say is if we synthesize the first part, we have a sign ordinance existing already in the town regulations. Any sign is in the town is subject to sign ordinance. So this piece on electronic signs will only be added into the sign ordinance. And it's, by law, every sign permit has to go through the planning and zoning office for permit.
okay, so you're saying the second part, or the part that says application is mute because that's what they have to do now anyway?
Yes.
Okay, I don't, just to get this going, I don't have a problem taking
Yes.
that out if everybody agrees. I don't have a problem changing on number 1 to a minimum of 5 minutes. I just want to pass this on to the other departments, and, see what they have to say, listen to their feedback as to, whether they see any problems with this, and then have it come back to this body, and if there are legitimate complaints or suggestions, we take them up.
Just so for the record, I did pass it to other departments earlier, to the mayor's office,
This-
economic development. Yes, I did. I did have, when we had this first draft, I said, this is what we are working on, please take a look, and I passed it on, but I did not receive any feedback. And I did not follow up too, which is my fault, but I will go back and follow up on
But this is
again.
more final language.
So today's is more revised, and I will send it back again.
Okay, because some of this is updated, especially since it says municipal electronic message sign. In some of our previous drafts, it just said electronic message sign.
Okay.
We're being very specific that this is strictly on municipal property owned or operated by the town of Stratford in some manner. How they choose to do it, that's up to them.
Yeah. That sounds fine, and I have one more minor edit on this. Sure. I would take off the hours of elimination. I would leave it to whoever is operating the sign to decide whether it's 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. or, whatever is the timings.
Well, the rationale for that was to be, cognizant of the neighborhoods,
Okay,
so that the sign isn't going on at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. That was all.
okay,
That's not what their time of putting it up, their work process. It's strictly, the sign goes off at 11 o'clock or whatever I said, it comes back on at 6 a.m.
okay.
So that neighbors, we're just.
But I do
good
want
neighbors.
to emphasize that this is town property,
Yes.
municipal, and the Board of Education going to have anything to do with this?
Not at this point.
Okay, because they're separate in the town of Old Saybrook.
Well, because we've said just West Broad
Right.
and Paradise Green. Now, as Mr. Watson said, if this is something that works well,
Right.
it's a good test, people like it, then
But-
we can take up adjustments to it.
This is going to take more time up in the permitting aspect than the digital application of,
Yeah.
all they do is put it on with the JPEG, and then it gets sent with a day to start and a day to end, and it's gone.
Yeah,
Very easy,
that's how it works.
very easy stuff.
I think this looks great, 1 to 10 only, and not the second part. And I agree with you, after your explanation on the timings, that yes, it makes sense to limit the hours, just to not have it spill over.
Just
So
be good neighbors.
I would send that not just to the other departments, but to the town attorney too, because in his draft, he did mention he wanted the specific language. The only amendment I, as a town planner, recommend or suggest that you may choose to take it or leave it is to include that line on what specific public interest you're trying to protect. And Mr. Watson did bring up a good point on sustainability, so I would say maybe we are trying to reduce paper and being green, and use LED lighting to save electricity costs, and
Now, would that be,
making it sustainable.
would that be within the ordinance, or would that be like on a cover letter?
Well, in order to avoid future lawsuits, somehow the language must be written to say this is what we are trying to do with this.
Okay,
So,
we can add that.
So this is going out as a proposal to the other departments for input.
Yes.
yes.
It's not going out as the ordinance, per se.
Well, we're saying this is our recommended text amendment to the zoning regulations. Please comment on it. Please give us your suggestions, or, and then bring it back, and we can look and if there's no comments, as there wasn't,
Can we get a copy as soon as possible of the edits? version?
Yeah, the chair has
Yeah.
worked on it really hard, so it's her product, and I would just help
Yeah,
her on this.
adding those, couple lines and putting in something about reducing sign pollution, reducing paper, making it more sustainable, preventing, well, I said sign pollution, but also preventing commercial signs on town property, because it happens now at Paradise Green and West Broad.
I think I wouldn't spell that out.
And reducing driver distraction with the multiple A-frame signs.
It's automatically assumed when you say nonprofits. I wouldn't spell the commercial properties thing, but I would just make it more like along the grounds of other things, and say, maybe you could start off with the first line saying the intent of this ordinance is to protect government interests, such as, reducing paper pollution on the green or something like that.
Okay.
All valid points. And I would also try to send it to zoning commission as a draft, just to get their thoughts on this, to speed up this process.
Okay.
So that we don't have to wait for one after the other, and then, we're running out of time.
Okay.
So then I make a motion that we forward this to the town departments that have an interest in it, and to the zoning commission for their comments,
And
and
the town
return it back to
attorney.
us. And the town attorney.
Right. With
But
the,
are we do?
with the changes that we've made.
I would ask someone to add a friendly amendment with the specific changes to my motion.
Okay. Well, how about if, as a friendly amendment, on number 1, we change the minimum from 5 seconds to 5 minutes? That we add verbiage as to the intent of this text amendment change to reduce sign pollution, make it more sustainable, reduce driver distraction,
And increase public awareness.
and increase public awareness.
That's a great point.
Cool.
How's that?
If somebody wants to second my motion, then I will accept her
second it.
friendly amendment. I accept your friendly amendment.
Thank you.
I seconded.
Okay, so we have a second by Mr. Watson. We have a friendly amendment that's been accepted by both groups, both people. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Yeah. Well, okay, moving right along, we really have nothing on the text amendment for the commercial kitchen for private residents. Anything on MetroCog bike share?
Yes, a request for information was put out on, actually it's going to be put out on August 22nd, and it'll be out for interested vendors to respond back with the specific questions to be answered in the request for information by September 22nd, just so you know. It's the regional, yes, it's the regional bike share program that Metropolitan Council of Governments is interested in sponsoring in the region, along with the Greater Bridgeport Transit Authority. And we, as a town, decided that we'd first do a pilot and see if it works good. And then, if we have to go through a more permanent solution, then go through the council for an ordinance or something. So the RFI that they have drafted basically asks questions of vendors as what type of bikes they would have, how they would clean up, how they would ensure that they're not dumped everywhere, and they're being used by everyone. There's equity and social justice that's being addressed, in which locations of the town you put them. So once the RFI goes out, I would look forward to the responses that are interested in town of Stratford, and get back to you with updates at the next meeting.
So the point we're at right now is that we've asked for information from companies who provide this service?
The region is asking on behalf of all 6 towns.
Okay.
But when we get the responses, it's up to us to pick a vendor that interests the town of Stratford. And
you're saying pick a vendor, but have we decided we're doing this?
It's only for the pilot. The mayor has okayed the pilot.
Oh.
So she said, first let's start with a few bikes and see how the pilot program grows. So if they have a selection committee and decide on a particular vendor, maybe I'm thinking it sometime in spring next year, they would have a pilot for 3 or 4 months to test it out. And if it's successful and they're doing what they're supposed to do, and if the ridership is good and safe, then maybe they would look into it.
Has anybody done any studies? Because I've read some very negative things about these bike share programs.
Yes.
About safety and dumping everywhere.
And that's what we are trying to address through the RFI, and we would carefully select somebody who's more responsible and, making sure that all the questions are being answered thoroughly. So that's the next step, once we get the interested vendors' responses. And mayor was only looking at 5 bikes at each location for about 5 or 6 locations, that's all. But the response I got from the region was that the vendors may not be interested if it's not a certain number, and the program may not be successful if you don't have a certain number of bikes on roads. So it's again dependent on what kind of responses we get from the vendors.
Any questions anymore? Discussion of Shakespeare property, where's that stand?
We are visiting other arts organizations in neighboring towns. We just visited Milford Arts Council last month and toured their facility and tried to know more about their programming and funding and their board. Now we have another meeting scheduled for Fairfield, I think next week. I'm also trying to get a meeting with New Haven's neighborhood music school. Our next step is when we meet back in September at the council meeting, we would like to report on the findings, and that the RDA and the council decide the next steps.
Next when?
I don't know when the
Oh, I
September.
thought you said
council-
next September or December?
September council meeting. I wanted to add something. on the hazard mitigation plan update. Do I have to waive the rules to go to resiliency to add it? No?
This is not something new.
It's just.
She doesn't have a problem, I don't have a problem.
So the natural hazard mitigation plan update that was prepared by consultants Mylona McBroom in partnership with the Metropolitan Council of Governments has been officially approved by FEMA last month. And now it's up to the town to officially approve it before it goes back to FEMA again for the final approval. So I will be present at the next month's council hearing to discuss this and get their official approval. I have sent all necessary documentation already to the council clerk. If anybody wants to know more about it and is interested in representing this on behalf of the Planning Commission, please feel free to attend the council hearing next month.
Why would it be in the girls' car?
Thank you. All righty, now we're going to amendment to Section 12, off-street parking regulations. Last month, we were given some homework to do. I was going through some recommendations from the from Planning and Zoning Administrator Jay Hibansky, and the first part is part of a memo from Jay Hibansky to Rich Fredette regarding parking, having rear parking only or rear and side parking to give the town a village feel.
Is this just for commercial or also residential?
I think it is just for commercial, is it not, Susmitha?
The parking regulations for all uses in the town, but the recommended changes or additions are on, if you look at the 11 by 17 sheet that's folded, on the second page, you have 6 topics where you see recommended. So those are the 6 topics that are not included in our regulations right now, and for which we would like to include the standards moving forward in the regulations, like for gyms and.
So we're not doing this?
That's a memorandum, that's a cover letter, but she wants to know which uses are specifically addressed.
We're not going to talk about this?
We are going to talk about that as a second part.
Oh.
First, the regulations
Okay,
and
because
then the
this
location.
was in your packet first, so.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
Let me go back to that, actually. I thought her question was which uses, but let me see. So,
Sandra, are you looking at,
I was looking at the email
Yeah.
from Jay
that's
to
what I thought, okay.
Rich.
yeah, when you talk about surface parking lots here, it's all the commercial properties. Yes, I'm sorry. I thought she asked this. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, okay.
Yeah, we've got a couple of things that we're looking at. The first thing that I started with anyway is the thought of having a text amendment that would allow all new construction on commercial properties shall have no parking of any motor vehicle in between principal structure and the street. All motor vehicle parking facilities must be located in the rear half of the property and concealed from the street to the greatest extent possible. Or surface parking lots shall be located in the rear or the side of principal buildings. Surface parking shall not be located between a building and a street. Mr. Hibansky is, I guess, requesting input from us on that. And he also gave us some scenario drawings of what it would look like.
If the group decides to move this to the next meeting, just so Commissioner Zalik is familiar with this, I don't mind because it's not an emergency. um, You know, our staff.
I love it already.
What?
I love it already.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
So you're up to speed already. Good job. Any comments, questions? Yeah. Well, I think it's an interesting, of course, this is going forward, and I would imagine if there were any major renovations to a commercial building, yeah.
And
Because we're not going to all of a sudden tell Burlington store, move your parking lot to the rear of the building.
Something new would have it that way.
Yeah, but the suggestion is basically moving forward that we would ask groups to put their building closer to the street with their parking in the rear or the side. And our real question is, one, do we agree with the rear, or do we want rear and side? Allow it on the rear and the side. Mr. Watson?
we almost, at least in the Todd residential and new construction, we always have been pushing everybody to have that 10-foot, 20-foot strip and nothing else. We did that with the residential district up in the north part of town.
Riders Landing
It's-
area.
We've been consistent about that. We did that over on Ferry Boulevard. I think it makes sense. It reflects modern zoning, how to reinvent cities. And it's a long-term proposition because you're going to have to wait for some of these buildings to fall down before we really will develop it. But if we don't do this, then we'll never get there. I think it's time. We've seen it so many times. It would end so many discussions on our part in planning and make things clear for the developers. And I also think it would end up making these projects better, because the developers could look at it from the beginning and say, how can I make this be the most attractive strip, instead of, saying I have to do this. And as a second kind of thought, when we pressure them into it, they could actually pre-design their buildings to fit those spots. My feeling is the first is much more complete with a vision of Stratford. The second one leaves it very open, and I understand how the second one might fit with a lot more projects, a lot more easier, but the first one is going to give us a much better outcome.
More consistent
Yeah.
look.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Yeah.
I said, Harold, for the most part, I agree with you. I'd love to see it all in the rear. But what if a developer has a long property and it just doesn't make, he's not going to build a long skinny building to cover the whole front of the property, right? It might be not really doable.
That's why we have Architectural Review Board. So now any development that's commercial for facades will be reviewed by Architectural Review Board, and a recommendation will be given to the Zoning Commission. And we have officially adopted the design guidelines, which talk about avoiding skinny structures, long skinny structures.
Well, what I'm saying, to Harold's point, is I would love to see all the parking in the back, but what if the property, the land is very long, and you're not going to build a long skinny building to cover the front?
Then you'll have.
So you would
Could-
probably need
could-
some side parking.
Could they then go before the Board of Zoning Appeals?
They could, as a, for a waiver.
Because it's a hardship.
Yeah,
Your scenario is really a hardship,
right.
as opposed to, the
Yeah, I mean, we
more-
don't have that many large properties, right?
Right.
So,
So they still have the opportunity.
okay.
I would, if I can suggest, I wouldn't say parking to the rear, but of the building, but parking enclosed by structures or something like that, where possible. Because, if you take a corner lot, you put it to the rear, it's still visible,
Right.
like from the side. And if there is a building that is occupying only a quarter of the lot, it still looks like a parking island there. So parking that frames, maybe at least for corner lots, looking at corner lots differently.
Maybe something different for them. And this, we're just really making a recommendation
The zoning commission.
saying that we agree with that first text amendment, but please consider corner lots and how you would change a corner lot. And that anybody could go before the Board of Zoning Appeals for kind of a non-conforming lot size. Mr. Watson?
On either of these, the more I think about it, is that if we really are going to make this make sense, we're going to say that you shall have a front and a back entrance, because that's part of the problem. What you were saying, a long, skinny nothing, that it's like with the new St. Vincent's facility, which actually is a great addition, although I hate the yellow siding. It's a great addition, except they put the entrance on the side and there's no feeling of life on the street. Had we simply said, do the entrance on the corner, then we would have had a building that was functional both from the parking lot but also from the streetscape. So the purpose of all of this is that we're not always going to have 1 million cars. Eventually people are going to walk. Eventually people will ride their bike or their electric scooter or whatever it is, and that's what we're moving towards, whether we like it or not. So we're preparing ourselves to not have empty lots all the time. Otherwise we live with the Burlington lot as our primary landscape. And that's what, I mean, I know from talking enough to Jay, that's what he's trying to address here is we got to stop having all of these. That's so 1960s. We're in the next century now.
So what are you suggesting?
Well, I would stick a note on saying that you need to add in here building entrance, because that's the problem with a lot of architects who go to design these sites is they don't want to design 2 entrances.
I was going to ask that question, actually. Would these prohibit rear entrances? Or would they have
No.
2 entrances?
You would think if they're required to put their rear parking, they'd make a rear entrance.
And then you have on the street the back end of every building. You don't have a streetscape. That's what I'm saying is.
Oh, I see, yeah.
That's what I'm saying is we need to say you need to put your parking in the back with an entrance, and you need to have a streetscape entrance in this.
Well, if you look at Bird's Eye Complex, that's what they have. It has a front entrance. Nobody uses it, but it has the rear entrance. Although I got to tell you, people are so confused when they go there where they're supposed to enter the building.
You're talking Bird's Eye,
Yeah.
You're right.
It's, but the parking is in the rear.
But
building.
Harold, does the architectural planning,
Review board?
would they require a front,
Oh, that's the,
We do ask for, a flow
an
of,
entrance?
like site circulation patterns in general, but we don't specify like 2 points of entry and exit or something like that.
Yeah, 'cause no, makes a good point about the front of the building could become kind of ugly if it doesn't have an entrance.
Yeah, I mean, it could be beneficial to have that way, but I wouldn't be too specific. Then we'll be having so many BZA applications. People will say we can't provide it, and we'll go for a waiver. But it's just getting into too specific details, I think.
A lot of buildings have 2 entrances, though.
They do, but those that can, they can't. If based on the ratio of parking that has to be provided on the site in comparison with the building square footage, sometimes they just can't make it work with only 1 entrance. The parking situation's tight, and I'm not saying we shouldn't. We are just advisory, so we can tell that to zoning commission and have them decide if we want them to.
Yeah, how about, like we've said, question the,
Can we do that is what we should ask, because I would hate to have an ordinance that is poorly written and now everybody's applying for waivers just to get around.
Well, maybe,
right now, we're not writing the,
and have a front entrance that provides a streetscape.
well, somebody walking or biking could go in the front entrance. And cars could go in the back entrance. So it's functional.
My concern is that if we're going to start rewriting any of this to help, we're trying to modify the way Stratford gets rebuilt. And if we don't do it right, we're gonna end up just putting in another set of bad things that we're not gonna get the results that we're looking for.
Well, also to that, the part that faces the roadway should have some greenscape in it.
We could ask questions, and I could get that clarified. We don't have to ask zoning commission, we can just ask Jay,
Yeah.
because he worked on this. The good part is that he hasn't officially submitted to the zoning commission yet. So the process is, again, we submit to the zoning commission, they hear at the meeting, but they don't, decide anything or discuss anything. They refer it to the planning commission, and then we discuss again, and then we send it back. So if these are some of your concerns at this meeting, I will raise it with the staff, and then we revise it accordingly, and then we put the proposal forward before the zoning commission, and that's when the process starts, and it'll take another 2 months to
Jim?
get it adopted.
Okay. Jim, did you have a question?
No, I think, just in terms of, whatever structures are facing the street and the pedestrian way, there should be some sort of aesthetic consideration or requirement that has to be met. Like, to Commissioner Watson's point.
Yeah.
You don't wanna put if the entrance is gonna be where the cars are parking, then you don't wanna have a streetscape of a brick wall,
Right.
facing the sidewalk or the walkway or the greenway or the bike path or anything else, there has to be something, that there should include language that takes into account the aesthetics and the streetscape.
I agree. Well.
And
I don't-
it could be already in the Todd zoning. That language could be there, it might not be as limited to what Jay has written here. So I will leave that open for that.
Well, maybe you could take the questions back to Jay, that we've brought up in suggestions, but tell him that we are conceptually in favor of having the parking in the rear of the building, and not the second one where they have a choice, rear or side, unless it's a non-conforming, it doesn't make sense, and then they can go to BCA. Okay? You got that? Mr. Staley?
So you're talking about no cars on the streets parking?
Say again, I'm sorry?
No vehicles parking on the street?
Correct.
Well, that too, they're saying, both.
Street parking is...
No, there's,
Street parking is different. It's just on the sites, private property that we are looking at. Not the street right-of-way is either managed by the town or the state, depending on what right-of-way. So it's just the private property.
Right, so this isn't really addressing that.
No,
It's just talking about on the private property, they're not
New
gonna have-
construction?
It would be new construction or major renovation,
So this is going to fit everyone?
Yeah.
Through the whole town?
if it's adopted, yeah. Commercial property, no, not,
Right. And
Not
there's no
residential.
discussion of multi-level parking?
no,
Okay.
not in what he's suggesting right here.
Well, the multi-level parking would come into play based on the square footage and the ratio of parking spaces provided. So if the site is too small and people want to accommodate parking, the required parking, they can automatically, it gets stacked up vertically.
They can request it, that doesn't mean that
By
by
lo-
zoning,
No, I mean, by zoning, if somebody wants to build in such a way that the lot size is smaller, but the building, coverage is bigger, and they have to accommodate like 50 spaces, and they have only space for 20 spaces, automatically the design is taken care of through basement or first-level parking, building on stilts or something like that. So it's,
The will has already
the
been
ratio
created,
determines
like West
that.
Haven or West Hartford. They built a municipal lot. It's paid for itself quick. with the meters, and everybody walks to the places. The Charlotte, North Carolina, all interactive. Beautiful.
All right. But
Will's been created.
you want to go on to this, right? Okay, so now we're going to go on to the Stratford proposed amendments for Section 12, off-street parking. Okay, there's two parts to this. There's a document, 8.5 by 11, that's on here. And then you have the 11 by 17, kind of like a Excel spreadsheet. And we're really looking at the second page.
You
have-
you
okay.
don't have this. This was distributed at the last meeting, so you can follow that. And I'll share with Pat.
Okay, okay.
I had to find that.
No, you can keep that. You know what? though?
It's,
I
it
will
was,
take
it was from the
that
last
and
meeting.
this Because that has red line
No.
on top. You can-
It was a parking.
Okay, so we're really, if you look at the 11 by 17 page, second page, you'll see in the second column, it says recommended, okay? Now, the recommendation is actually in the document. Okay, so the first one that says recommended is health clubs and gyms. And that is, where did I see it?
Did you find
Yeah.
that document?
Okay, it's on the third page.
No, that's a,
So the recommendation for health clubs and gyms, one space for every 250 square feet. Sure.
Last meeting, you requested me to bring an example or a prototype of existing to compare. Unfortunately, all of our old files are currently being moved to a different location and reorganized. They used to be in the basement of this building. So I tried to look up for an example that is most comparable, like Crunch Fitness, not LA Fitness, because I was told that LA Fitness has expensive memberships, and that's why very few people use the parking there, because there are fewer members, as opposed to Crunch Fitness, which is like $9.99 per month, and a lot of people use that, and the parking is almost always full. But either way, both of these, I couldn't find the files to see what was allowed as part of parking for them, because we had no standard parking regulation. So I did not select that, but I selected a school to, let you know what it means to compare what standards we have here to a real-life example. So in general, for the health clubs and gyms, I would come to the school example later, but for the health clubs and gyms, you could either have one space per 300 square feet or one space for 250 square feet, like it is recommended for Stratford. That was the question that was raised last month, why Shelton is recommending one space for 300, whereas Stratford is only going as one for 250. And it's like we're being more conservative maybe, but if you want to be more liberal, you can still use the Shelton example and say, let's do one space for 300.
And right now, Milford has one space for 50 square feet.
Yes, and I would say that is an overkill of parking. One space for 50 is very outdated. So you could suggest whether one for 250 or one for 300. It's your choice.
Now, this is for new construction?
Yes, or significant alterations to an existing site. If somebody is redesigning their whole building square footage, and you...
Like the edge in Stratford by the Devon Bridge?
I wouldn't foresee that to happen. I would say mostly new construction or new development, I would say, on site.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? Do we want to accept the recommendation? of having a standard of one space for every 250 square feet for health clubs and gyms?
Based on Mr. Hibansky's knowledge and his, his study of the situation, I would go along with his recommendation.
So is that a motion to accept?
That's a motion to
the
accept.
Recommendation?
Yes.
Okay.
We don't have to vote on anything right now, because it has to go to zoning and then come back to us for voting on them. It's just a recommendation you're making at this point, that,
But would it help us
Send it forward.
to go ahead and vote on this and send it to them saying, this is what we approved, you decide what you want? Wouldn't it make it, wouldn't that speed us up
Speed it
some?
up.
it's counterclockwise, but it's fine.
So really, the motion is we're accepting the recommendation of one space for every 250 feet and recommending it to the zoning commission for their approval.
Yes.
Voted.
I have a
That-
question.
Sure.
Did we have a motion and a second, right?
No.
We need a second. We got a motion.
Second?
Mr. Vigliotti. Now we're second.
Okay, now, but Sue Smith, I thought I just heard you say you couldn't find prior examples of health clubs' parking requirements. So how do we know that this is an appropriate amount?
That's why we have this comparison sheet where we looked at West Haven, Shelton, Milford, and I previously worked in New Haven too. So I know based on what recommended standard practices, it's okay to go with 1 for 250 because you don't want parking islands, and considering all the multimodal improvements happening in the town. It's a judgment call based on,
Do we know how many spaces the current health clubs have?
Unfortunately, I don't know for Crunch, but for LA Fitness, it's a shared parking site. So it's
LA
hard to-
Fitness is the one where the movie theater used to be?
Where the, and then there's
Oh, there's plenty of
Marshalls.
space
It's
there.
plenty, and it's not a good example.
But the one at BJ's parking lot, that seems always really busy.
Try to look for files.
Yeah.
No files, and that's the problem right now, that we have absolutely no files on special cases at this point. We only
Yeah, that
have
one
BZA
doesn't seem like it
files.
has enough parking.
Yes, and, and again, that's a shared parking lot too. Unfortunately, that's another thing. It's just standard practice.
Yeah,
At this point, looking
okay.
at zoning regulations of other towns and making that call.
And right now, we have no
Does it matter, though? Would it matter if it is a shared space or not? If it's a freestanding building that's just a health club that they need 250, but if it's a shared space, it would be different?
Yeah, we have shared parking regulation.
Oh, okay.
It accounts for the fact that there are other uses on site and automatically reduces the required parking for that particular facility because they can share with other users.
Okay.
But
working against that.
no, it won't. It's for exclusively if somebody wants to put on a site, just a
Freestanding.
fitness club or a gym.
And can I make a comment? The thing about shared spacing that I've read in terms of nationally parking planning, that shared spaces are usually governed by the developer or the owner of the properties. And it is to their benefit to make sure that their people are happy. So if they're oversharing the spaces, then their tenants are going to be upset and they're not going to keep them. So it usually it finds a way to balance itself out in the economy. Too much crowding and someone leaves. Yeah, it is in that sense that it does work its way out. I think what we're doing here is much more general for the whole town, so that proposals can be packaged in a way that have some basis in reality before they come in. But I still think that the whole shared, we ignored it in redoing all the other parking regulations. We kind of decided that part of the flexibility we gave was that there are shared, like in strip malls and that. You can't ask the pizza parlor to have 12 parking spaces when they don't need 12 all day long. That you just have to kind of balance it out. And we erred with less parking because that's what planning nationally is saying we should do if we want to keep people walking and riding and doing other kinds of transportation.
I've seen after the fact, changes in parking, and shared parking, where all of a sudden signs are going up and, well, these spaces are for this one,
Yep.
these spaces, these two. That's becoming quite popular in some of these areas of shared parking. And that's not a part of planning and zoning. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No? Let's get going.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that's unanimous. Okay, the next one is for automotive services. Then, and that, the recommendation is one space per 200 square feet. Currently, we have no standard. In Milford, it's one space per 250. In Cheltenham, it's one space per 200 square feet. Same in Westgate. And again, this is a recommendation to the zoning commission.
If you notice the line of thought, everywhere we're trying to make sure that we're not falling short of parking. So where it is very extremely conservative, like one space for 250, we're going on the lower square footage so we can accommodate more parking on site, as opposed to, having one for 250, you're getting one for 200 here. In the previous example too, you're taking one for 250, then one for 300, so that you could provide some more parking, and, there's no pushback saying there's not enough parking in future. So we are more on the conservative side when we're looking at the numbers, even though we want reduced parking.
May I comment on having, my father ran a garage. I like the idea of doing 200 square feet, one space per 200 square feet, which is the lower standard, but picking up Milford's 3 spaces for bay lift, because that really tells you the volume of work they do. It gives you a sense of the scale of that business.
Do you want to make that in motion?
I move that we accept one space for 200 square feet and or 3 spaces per bay / lift. Excuse me? Well, or means the greater of. Where am I?
Well, I get, you're right there, right? So,
Oh, sorry. Okay, the greater of one space per 200 square feet or 3 spaces per bay / lift.
Any discussion? And again, this is a recommendation. No discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Next, schools. For schools, Jay's recommending one space for every 3 seats.
I think every seat means every student. I assumed the seat is based on 1 seat per student.
But why would we need spaces in a grammar school, a grade school?
Yes. So What I would say is per student instead of seat. That was my suggestion. Commission Chair, like, can I just explain this? I looked at the Nichols Elementary School as an example, and I have the slides that I got to you where this, you can look at the location and the school. It's right behind Town Hall on Nichols Avenue. So the lot area is 5.21 acres, and quite recently, in 2017, they went for a special case for parking because their parking wasn't sufficient, and then at that time, they wrote this letter to Jay Hibansky, which I made a copy of, dated January 31st, 2017, and they had two options for parking. And the second option was obviously picked, and they now have total of 96 parking spaces on site. So I used the standards that are prescribed for Milford, Shelton, West Haven, and also for Stratford, the recommended. And so how much would that mean in terms of the square footage occupied by this site? So when I looked at everything, first of all, for recommended parking for Stratford, based on one space for 3 seats, I assumed 3 seats to be 3 students, but to make it more clear in the language, I would say spaces per students as opposed to spaces per seats. The overall enrollment for Nichols Elementary School was approximately 450 on an average in the past few years. So based on that, if it was 1 for 3, you would have required 150 spaces. If it was 1 for 6 students, you would have required 75 spaces. So it falls in the range of 75 to 150, and that's exactly, they went with the 96 on site here. Now, I am new to Stratford, as you know. I've only been here for the past couple of months, and you should make that judgment whether the 96 the 96 spaces that they were approved of and they provided right now is sufficient, or you would think they would require 150 spaces. Or if you think they are more than enough, would you want to go with the 75 spaces, which is 1 for every 6 students?
Like,
So that's a
grade
judgment.
school students don't drive,
Yes.
so I don't,
No, I would say per student enrolled, their parent dropping them. That's the line of thought there. It doesn't mean that the students would come and drive. So for every 6 students that are being registered, you're assuming that a certain number of parents would not take the bus, but they would drive their students to the school.
but they don't need to park, they're just dropping them off.
In this case, they didn't have a place for drop-off in the second option that they had. They had the parking to the east of the property where they have to come in. It was a 2-way parking lot, and that was the first option they had in this letter, had that parent drop-off and then going away. But they thought it was too dangerous or something, I guess. So the second part is the new parking lot will allow for a 2-way traffic circulation pattern, and vehicles will be able to circulate around the easterly lot. This will reduce traffic conflicts at parent pickup and drop-off times. My children are, one of my children is still in elementary school, and I know that some parents do come and park and stand by the door until the doors open and the parents, hand over the child to the greeter. So in other cases, it's just a matter of coming in and just temporarily using that lot and leaving. Besides that, I think it's also for the faculty who serve in that school,
Right.
the staff and other people. So you're including the faculty and the visitors and the parents and everyone. So you could see as 1 for 6 seats or 1 for 6 students, doesn't matter, but it doesn't mean that it's the elementary students who are driving and parking cars there.
Having been a school teacher in New York City where parking was always a premium, when they do 1 space per 6 seats, what they actually are doing is saying that if you have a class, say, of 20, then you essentially need 3.5 adult personnel with their cars in order to fulfill those kids' needs. So that's essentially what it is. There's very little, probably 4 or 5 parking spaces for non-employee. But by the time you get teachers and counselors and kitchen aides and all those kinds of things, you have three people attached to each group of 6 kids. It's the one thing I don't think we should shortchange our students on. No, I really do. I think we should, because particularly this school, the reason they did this parking lot is kids have gotten hit on the street. It's a dangerous corner, and there is no parking around elsewhere if you're not parking in that lot, you're not going to find parking anywhere nearby. Go ahead.
Just not looking at specific schools, but if we're looking for a general standard, do we know what we have in town right now? Do we know how many parking spaces we have per school? Or
I pulled out for Nichols as an example, but it's a case-by-case
But it's a bad
basis.
example, right?
Yeah.
Without the drop-off area?
Yes, it's a bad example, but I wanted to look for Stratford High too. If you want me to look into it, I can. It's up to you.
But a grade school would be different from a high school, because high school students would drive, so you would need more spaces than just the teachers and the food service prep and
And
the
that's why we have
counselors.
separate standard for high school recommended here.
I don't see.
I don't see in the draft.
Not on the letter.
And I see here in the sheet. So something's missing in that draft, and I have to go back and check.
But it just says recommended there. You don't see what the recommended.
So we have to look into that.
Yeah.
So if we can stop at elementary today, and then I don't see the other 3 things like self-service cleaning and food store, and then,
It was just my copy.
no, I didn't see it, and I'm sorry for the oversight. I'll go back and check.
So for this discussion, we're just going to talk about elementary.
Just the elementary school.
So 1 per 3 seats seems a lot to me.
I think he
Seems
said
a lot
1
of
per
spaces.
6. One
No,
per
he
six.
says per 3
It says 1 per 3.
in here.
Maybe we should stop, because maybe this is high school. It just says school.
Okay, we should stop and then we'll take it.
Clarify.
Yeah, clarify that.
Do we need a motion to table that?
What,
It's on the agenda. The parking regulations are on the agenda.
So we
But if we're not acting, don't we need a motion to table till the next?
continue it or something. You could say your discussion will continue at the next meeting.
Okay, whatever.
It's administrative.
Yes, I'm looking at the Nichols. And they had 49, then there's officers of 73 and 96, and a staff of approximately 70. So where do the students come in, 3 for that square footage?
I don't know. It's too much detail that I didn't delve into. All I wanted to know is the square footage of the building, how many spaces
Because we're
they have.
talking square footage for
Right now.
students. And this is, they have a staff of 70.
Okay,
And-
well, that's what we tried.
That's another reason to stop here, and let's clarify it, and then come back to it.
70 faculty.
But at least we've got 2 recommendations out of the way.
So they're not even meeting the faculty requirements.
Okay, so we really don't have any homework. But Susmitha does. They keep her busy. I want to thank Commissioner Staley for going out to Old Saybrook and taking pictures and getting more information for us. Thank you very much. And welcome to Commissioner Zalick. We might see you more often, I have a feeling. You may. I didn't realize you were running, but yeah, you would not be an alternate. Mr. Watson did the same thing. He was an alternate first, and then he ran in his district, and now he's a regular commissioner. Okay. I do have one, well, I'll wait. It's not really that important. Anything else, any member comments and concerns? Otherwise, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Don't move.
Oh, fight it off. Okay, we'll go with Mr. Vigliotti as making the motion and Ms. Zalik making the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much, everybody.
Could you just wait a
Yeah.
minute?
Oh,
I have the public hearing, there's a public hearing item for next month, and I have the applications. I thought instead of us driving over, we'll just hand it over.
Okay, good.
I will send a staff report separately.
thank you.
James Bigliotti, so that's you. Dan
This
Semp
guy's
is
the
not
one.
here, so I had to drop it off. Sandra Zaley, the public hearing item for next month. John Staley. And I will send my staff report by email. Harold Watson. And then these are.
Oh, okay. These are extras.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.